Buenos días a todos. Me cambió esto. Yo creo que un segundito, porque estoy tratando de... Ok, voy a quitar ahorita esto porque si no la pantalla me cambia. Em, Buenos días a todos. Ok, la grabación está en curso. Muchas gracias, Ale. Eh, Bienvenida, Jenna. Seguramente empiezan a unirse ahorita más personas, normalmente 10 y 10 empiezan a unirse. Entonces, estoy segura que van a estar uniéndose más personas. El día de hoy nos acompaña Jenna. Ella es directora de un movimiento internacional que ahorita voy a presentarla. Solo quiero hacer como información acerca de la reunión del día de hoy. La reunión va a ser en inglés. Jenna habla español, ella me está entendiendo. Ella me entiende, habla español y las preguntas pueden ser en español, pero bueno, para tener mayor fluidez en la conversación, Jenna va a hablarnos en inglés el día de hoy acerca del programa. Bueno, de su plática la va a tener en inglés y las preguntas pueden hacerlas en español. Yo estoy aquí para apoyar, igualmente ella puede leerlas también en español. Y cualquier cosa, pues aquí estamos para apoyar. La verdad es que es un gran privilegio. Esta es el último seminario de la jornada que estamos realizando de este semestre. Habrá más el siguiente semestre, todos con invitados internacionales y algunos de muy alta categoría también, como el día de hoy es llena. Voy a permitirme presentarla para no utilizar mucho más tiempo y que ella pueda comenzar. Jenna es una pensadora de sistemas agrícolas que lleva a cabo proyectos para sustentar el medio ambiente y las personas durante los últimos 2 años, que ha fungido como directora de YPAR, que ahorita nos va a decir, pero es Young Professionals in Agriculture and Development, ¿verdad? Jóvenes profesionales, les decía, o algo diferente tal vez a lo que nosotros tenemos en mente cuando hablamos de agrónomos o de gente que se dedica a la agricultura. También pueden dedicarse a la parte de desarrollo. Ella se esfuerza por ser una líder que sirve para fomentar la igualdad entre generaciones y todos los delimitadores de privilegios. Antes de unirse a YPAR, fue oficial de política agrícola federal de la Asociación Alemana de Jóvenes Rurales, y aquí espero decirlo bien, pero es Bund der Deutschen Landjugend en 2020, como investigadora Fulbright en la Universidad Humboldt de Berlín en 2018-2019, se centró en la participación de los jóvenes en la política agrícola y fue presidenta en 2013 y 2014 de la Asociación Internacional de Estudiantes de Agricultura y Ciencias Afines, IAAS. Se graduó de las universidades Iowa State en 2015 y de Penn State en 2018 con una maestría en fitopatología y en agricultura internacional y desarrollo. Jenna es originalmente de Estados Unidos, pero ahorita nos acompaña desde Alemania, en donde realiza sus funciones y su labor. Jenna, bienvenida. Te dejo para que puedas iniciar.
Muchas gracias, Alice. Um,
Ujú.
yeah, I will switch to English because my Spanish is not so good anymore these days. I actually use English mostly in my job. And I thank you for your patience. I will remember to speak a little bit slowly for those of us who English is not the first language. And I actually now need permission to share my screen.
Ok. ¿Le parece que otra vez se le fue el permiso a Jenna?
Now I am the presenter. Okay, super. Let us try again. Okay, super. I trust it's working. Good?
Yeah, sí.
Okay, super. Fantastic. So thank you so much for the warm introduction. And I think I didn't know I was the last one in the series for the semester, so that's fantastic actually, because I'd really like to take a perspective on a potential job opportunity that you have for your future career as a young agronomist or as a young PhD student, whatever discipline that you're studying in agriculture. There's a journey after your studies, as I know is probably very forefront on your mind. And today I wanted to talk about the career of international development cooperation, international aid, whatever you would like to call it, because I think, of course, because I work in the field, I think it is a very fascinating field to work in and one that really motivates me. And maybe you would find a motivation in working in it as well. So just to give a small overview of my presentation, I'll just give an introduction about myself, the context of development cooperation. I'll also go through a little bit about how I got here, because I want you to see a path that is not straight, it's not linear, but how you might get to a career in international cooperation as well. Then I'd like to tell you just a little bit about my organization and about YPARD. It should give you a little bit of an idea of what an organization that works in development cooperation concretely does. And then, of course, I'd love to open up the floor for questions. I think I'm try to be relatively open. Don't be afraid of any hierarchy or anything like that. So please do write your questions down and please do reflect during the presentation. First, of course, Ilse did a very nice job of introducing me, and I thank you so much for the generous introduction. And I just thought I'd give a little bit of context of where I come from. I come from a very agricultural state. I come from the state of Iowa, which is highlighted in red because normally I have to tell folks, okay, it's quite close to Chicago. It's a very agricultural area, but maybe some of you are aware of this because, of course, Mexico and the United States are neighbors. But we grow a lot of corn. It's an area of very industrial agriculture. And so this is something that really was a huge part of my childhood, was being on the farm with my grandparents, seeing how corn was grown, being around in nature, and being in a rural environment. Now, many years later, I'm 31 years old. Now I live in the big city. For us in Europe, it's a big city for 4 million people in Berlin, Germany. And I'll tell you a little bit how I got there through the course of my presentation. But first, I want to start with painting the picture of the context of development cooperation. And this should sound very similar to the context that you're working in when you think about the broader picture in international agriculture, local agriculture, regional agriculture. So things that I'm thinking about every day in my job are, of course, climate change. How do we mitigate and adapt climate change through agriculture and through ecosystem restoration? I'm thinking about biodiversity loss. I'm thinking also about things like conflict, for example. So conflict, whether that's in Ukraine, if that's in Sudan, if that's in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, these are all places where our organization has members and that really affects folks, right? I listed climate change twice on my slide because it's so important. That really tells you how much I'm thinking about climate change. And also demographic changes, right? Like rural to urban migration is a huge theme everywhere in the world, on every continent. And it's something that's having a huge effect on agriculture, on food production, and also on the lives of young people. We also have huge demographic changes that are going on. We see that the farming segment, of course, is aging and getting older and older. Many of our extension agents are also getting older and older, and we really need a generational renewal in agriculture. And so because I particularly in our organization focus on youth and young people, this generational renewal aspect is quite interesting. So if you're working in a job in international development or international development cooperation, topics that you might be dealing with could be things like green jobs or decent livelihoods, decent working conditions, for example. You could be dealing with new concepts of how to do agriculture in a systems thinking way. So agroecology here is also one of these examples, and things that can get very political in the representation of what type of agriculture we want to see in the future. I already mentioned big topics like climate change mitigation, adaptation, and biodiversity. We, of course, also see things like access to land and access to resources, and land rights and resource rights being huge topics that we're working on. And also, of course, digitalization, or as I like to name it, fair digitalization, because it's not digitalization at every price. There are also things that aren't on this slide that our organization, for example, isn't particularly focusing on, like nutrition would be a good example, or health, which a little bit falls out of the scope of food and agriculture. But you can easily make the argument that it doesn't, because you need a healthy body to work the land. Because I care so much about youth, I also wanted to say, because the audience here today is mostly young folks, is that there's an ongoing interest in youth and in intergenerational dialogue. And you should see this also as a really huge opportunity for you when you're thinking about engaging in international development or volunteer opportunities, is that there's really a big interest to hear your voice, hear how you want to do things in the future, how you want to change things, and your ideas for doing things different. And I'd say that is a really big message from my side, that this is a huge opportunity in international cooperation. And this gives us a huge opportunity to say we want to do things differently, because we know that things have been done the wrong way in the past in many cases, right? And this is why we have so many of these crises. For example, in our organization, because we're small, we can say, okay, we really want to see women at the forefront of our work. We want to see them being leaders in our work. We encourage each other as young leaders and young women. This is something that's very important to us, and something that we're trying our very best to do differently. We also do little things that end up being really big. Like, for example, in Europe, we can take the train instead of taking a plane, which sounds like a no-brainer when you're someone who's thinking about climate change mitigation and adaptation and you're in a small organization. But it's something that a lot of people in the sector aren't yet doing. And so this is something that we're trying to do differently and do with integrity. And these things are all just so important, because I like to also step back to the bigger context. And this is something that at least we in the development space don't like to talk about very much. And the core of our work is inequality. Because if there was not inequality, we would not have challenges with hunger, with poverty, with biodiversity loss, climate change, all of these challenges. And so I do want to point out that one of the biggest challenges that we're facing here is also wealth accumulation, right? Because we see that the most new wealth being created in the world is actually going to the richest 1% of persons. And we can say, okay, wait. Maybe this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because then that turns into tax revenue for programs that help alleviate poverty and hunger. But we actually don't see this being the case. So we see in most OECD countries, but also countries all around the world, that tax rates on the rich are actually decreasing even as they're earning more and more. And this is really important for the development landscape, because actually funding for development aid, we see from analysis from the World Bank, for example, that financial flows to developing countries aren't actually increasing over time. And so this makes this work more timely than ever, because in the last 2 years, we actually saw hunger increase for the first time in decades. This is something that we didn't expect to see. And this is about inequality and these crises that we're facing. Well, this is actually what I just explained, that aid is not increasing significantly. And I think this really matters, because this gets to the core of what we as agriculturalists, as agronomists, are working on, and that is really food systems transformation, right? We're trying to work on food systems that are serving people, that are feeding our populations, that are nourishing our populations, and are making sure that people aren't being hurt by pesticides, that they have fair labor conditions, all of these things, that they have a livelihood that brings them the income they need, the social recognition that they want, and to have a good life and have good food. So, okay, this all sounds great and fantastic, but how would I actually work in a career that is looking at some of these bigger pictures? And for me, it was never a straight path, although I guess when you read my CV now, it looks like it was very carefully calculated that I thought, okay, I will study some foreign languages and then I'll move to Europe. This would be fantastic. No, this was never on my radar. I was thinking about being an engineer, in fact, and I started then to reflect in my first year of university on my true strengths and on my values. And I have a picture of folks talking together to represent that I really like to hear the perspectives of other people. I was also often told in my master's study that I often seem more like a social scientist than anything else. Maybe that's true now. But I love to interact with people. I love to get new cultures. I put a picture of this bimbap bowl here to represent getting to know food from different cultures. Of course, food is one of my deepest loves. And I love to try food from all over the world. And I think food really brings people together, and it is really the basis of a good life. So that's why I decided to study food and agriculture. And I decided also that profit didn't motivate me so much. So I was seeing a lot of problem sets as an engineer that were telling me, okay, please optimize this process in order to make more revenue for the company. And that was something that it wasn't so interesting to me. I was like, well, I want to know why I should optimize this process. Is it so that we can feed more people or to have better jobs or something like this? And so this really took me in the direction of agriculture and international cooperation. And so I was lucky enough to still find that in my bachelor's at Iowa State. And I studied biology, but I also studied a program called Global Resource Systems. And so this gave me the opportunity to do some internships. So I did an internship at the Centro Internacional de la Papa in Lima, Peru. And this was a fantastic opportunity. This is a part of a large network of international research centers that have gene banks that store germplasm from all types of different crop species. The Centro Internacional de la Papa particularly stores genetic material from potato, of course, as you would gather from the name, but also sweet potato and Andean root and tubers. And this was a huge opportunity for me to practice Spanish, which is something that I didn't know at that point, was that you need to actually practice your languages in the future to maintain them. So this is a lesson for you all when you're learning a foreign language. And it gave me an opportunity to really see that first look into what development cooperation can look like and what a research career could potentially look like in international development. After my internship at the Centro Internacional de Papa, I found the opportunity to do a study abroad in Germany. And so I did a study abroad in Germany at the University of Hohenheim. And I was lucky enough there to find a scholarship from the DAAD, which actually later I should put a link in, or I can send this in links for DAAD in case any of you are interested, because DAAD has a wide range of programs to do fellowships, research abroad, study abroad, different things like this at many universities in Germany. So this would be a fantastic opportunity. And so then I started to learn German and get interested in Germany, where I had never had an interest in Germany before. Yes. But I think one of the most important parts of my early career was my volunteer engagement. And in my introduction, is kindly mentioned that I was president of this organization, IAS or IAAS, the International Association of Agriculture and Related Sciences Students. This is an organization that focuses on agricultural students all around the world, and it's about connecting people to have peer-to-peer learning opportunities, exchange opportunities, and to create an organization together. And this was completely transformative for me. It was work that I was never paid for, but it was something that I made such deep friendships through, and that I learned so much through, because I had the opportunity to completely learn by doing. It was, okay, here's this organization, we want to have exchange opportunities. So for example, we held a congress for our fellow members of our association in my home state of Iowa. This was a great opportunity to take really this theoretical knowledge from the study of, okay, how do you plan an event, or how do you plan a learning opportunity for someone, to really putting it in motion, to really troubleshooting it, to really seeing what are the challenges with bringing young people from all around the world with their visas, for example, to the United States. A terrible nightmare with the visa situation for a short-term opportunity. These are all things that I was able to learn at that point at a very relatively young age of 20 years old. So now already 10 years ago, completely laid the groundwork for the rest of my career, because those were extremely practical skills. Even something as simple as knowing how to write an effective email and to effectively communicate with other folks through an email in a meeting. Those were all things I really used ES as a testing ground for. And so one of my biggest messages for you all in your career development is these volunteer engagement opportunities can be golden for you to develop yourself further and to really test things out that aren't, without having a lot of risk, right? And you can also have the latitude to be extremely creative in some of these organizations like EAS or like YPARD. So I can only speak very positively about these volunteer engagements. Folks I met in EAS, I still go to visit quite frequently, right? So we now also work in similar areas of work. So I have a friend from Spain who I see regularly, a friend from Belarus, and I'm actually married to one of the friends who I met who is a German in EAS. So the connections are lifelong. After my bachelor's work, I really felt that I wanted to further my education. And I really spent a while thinking about whether I would continue my education immediately or if I wanted to go work. But because I had had experience in EAS, I felt that I was ready to further my education, and I was really curious about research. And that curiosity for research had really been perked by my experience at Centro Internacional de la Papa. And so I went to Penn State University, especially because they had a dual master's program and PhD program with international agriculture and development cooperation, and then with the various other combination of titles that you could take in the agricultural faculty. And so I decided to combine my studies with plant pathology. And the picture I show here actually is not of my own research, but it's a research project of a young woman who was in the horticulture department doing her PhD. And she is showing us actually her research on green roofs at Penn State. And this is something that I also wanted to emphasize in my presentation, is to learn also from the students who are PhD students who might be a little bit older than you, and take the opportunity to visit their research and learn about what they're doing, about their struggles, about their joys, about how they're reflecting on the job market and on different opportunities. This is definitely an opportunity that we took together as students at Penn State. And one of the ways I actually know is through a student organization for international development studies students. And we got a chance to interact a lot more through that and to share ideas, share our struggles, share our dreams for the future. And that's fantastic because in the end, a lot of us are going to work in environments where we're not only working only with agronomists or only with agricultural extension agents. And so this is an opportunity that I encourage you also to actively seek out, actively create for yourself. And I know that because of the international focus of your faculty and the creativity of the seminar series, also something that should be really possible for you all. So what are potential job types in international development cooperation? I have 4 icons to represent different types of jobs that you could potentially be thinking about. So I've mentioned several of them throughout this presentation. On the left, you see a young woman who I would like to represent as a field agent. So this is someone who really works with communities in the field, implementing projects on the ground with the community to give them technical expertise, because maybe she is a plant pathologist, for example, or maybe she's an expert in dairy cattle, for example. And so she can then give her advice to the local community about how they can do things better. I have a picture of a microscope here because, of course, research or synthesis of research is also a big part of development cooperation. So whether you're actually doing the research or you're taking the results of the research and looking at how you can then create programs out of it, create policies out of it, create informational briefs out of it, this is all something that could be available to you if you're interested in very scientific careers. And of course, like every good career path, there's a great deal of critical thinking and writing in here. So this is what the notepad is supposed to represent. A career in international development is always going to be about being able to express your ideas on paper, but also express your ideas in oral presentations, through meetings, and to really make that bridge in your analysis between research, between the practical, and to put that together to create your work. There is also a big role in development cooperation of potential teaching opportunities, right? So there's also lots of need for training, for workshops, not only of development practitioners like myself to learn how to do things better, but also to give trainings in communities, for example, so that you learn from the community about their good practices, what they're doing, and also share good practices that you've learned in other places so that there's the circular exchange of knowledge. But a career in international development, of course, is not for everyone. So just like maybe a career in engineering wasn't a great fit for me, like chemical engineering, for example, a career in international development, of course, takes particular competencies. So I have the picture of the hourglass here because international development requires patience, right? You need to be patient with finding funding, and you need to be patient with the different paces of work, that how things happen in different cultures. So I also put the picture of the woman doing yoga because you need to be flexible and to move with different environments. And you may have a very nice idea of how things are going to go in your mind. And once you start talking with the partners, or once you get to the event or the location, things are going completely different than we imagined, even as a team. This is fine. This is normal. But it's something that you have to be comfortable with, right? That you know, okay, it's okay for me to adapt to those type of situations. This is also very important. And a thing that I don't have an icon here for is that being willing to learn languages, being able to try new things, to go out of your comfort zone, I think, and actually enjoy those things is something that will motivate you throughout a career in international cooperation and development. So if those are things that you love to do and how you like to naturally work, then it could be a really good career area for you. Finally, in the last part of my presentation, I just want to tell you a little bit about our network in case you're interested in getting involved, but also just to give you a little bit of a concrete idea of what an organization working in this space might be doing. So we are a youth network, Young Professionals for Agricultural Development. And what we say makes us unique is that we are really created by young professionals for young professionals. And our goal is to help each other realize our full potential. We're a network that is 15 years old, so relatively young, but for a youth organization, we've actually been around for quite a long time. And we include folks who are under 40 years of age because we are focusing on young agricultural professionals, not just youth. So this is an organization that you can be involved in beyond your work at university as well. I just show you our organogram in the shape of a branch because we try to emphasize that we are very non-hierarchical. But I work in the global coordinating unit, and we are then governed by a steering committee. And we have country representatives in 62 countries. And then we have regional coordinators on each continent and local representatives and teams. YPART is hosted by a number of organizations. So in Europe, we're hosted by the Czech University of Life Sciences Prague. In Africa, we are hosted by the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, based in Accra, Ghana. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we are hosted by the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences, based in Beijing, China. And sorry, if I said China, I meant the region Asia Pacific, and we are hosted in China. Please excuse me. And then we are hosted for our financial management by a Swiss extension organization called Agrodea, and we're searching for a regional host in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is our board, and I just wanted to give you an idea of how these nonprofit organizations are working, right? Because we have a membership base of individual members, we have our regional coordinators, and then there's me, who I'm an employee of the organization. And then we have people who help give the strategic direction of the organization by working in our board. And so in board position is also volunteer, but they help give the strategic direction of the organization. And so in this board, it's very important to have folks that are representing many different disciplines in agriculture, but also, of course, are from all around the world. We have our regional coordinators here, so you can see also that we have regional coordinators from all different regions of the world and also from all different professional backgrounds. So Kofi, our coordinator for Africa, has a plant protection background. Stacey Hammond, she has a background in cryopreservation. So she does research in cryopreservation as her part-time job and then part-time working for YPART. Cryopreservation is a technique of genetic preservation, in case you're not a plant expert. And Bijie Jing, she is a leader and higher administrator at the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences. And Sebastian is working at a nonprofit organization in Colombia, and he is also the head of our steering committee. As I mentioned before, YPART is all over the world. We're based in 62 countries, excuse me. And the chapter in Mexico is being reinvigorated. So if it's something that you would be interested in being more involved in, please do get in touch with us. The last part about telling you about YPART, I'll just give you some examples of our work program. So one of the parts of our work program that I really burn for is policy support to overcome structural barriers. And YPART is working in some global fora, and we're really working to bring young folks' voices to these global fora. So we have a policy working group. It meets several times a year, and we put out policy positions based on the hot topics at hand in the policy environment. So, for example, last year we put out a policy position for the World Forestry Congress that took place in Korea. We put out a policy position for the Stockholm 50 Plus, held by the United Nations Environmental Program. And we were also quite involved in the UNFCCC COP27. This is the Conference of the Parties on Climate Change. This was held in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt last year. And we were very involved in putting forward youth ideas at that 2-week conference and political negotiation. We also work, of course, in professionalization and knowledge management. And so this we see is really important to helping young people gain new skills, especially after that time when maybe we've left university, but we don't have a lot of chances to continue our education after that. And we feel like maybe there's this hole after we leave. So one thing that YPART does, for example, in YPART Europe, is that in training current students at the Czech University of Life Sciences interns. And this is quite important for young folks in the Czech Republic, especially of the African diaspora, because it's quite difficult for non-Czech students to find an internship in Czechia, but there's still the need for them to have these internships in order to complete their studies. And so this is something where we really tailor it to the needs of the young person and try to bring them more opportunities, not only in Czech Republic, but also internationally through YPART. So this is an example of projects we're doing. Another project we're doing in professionalization and knowledge management is we are working on an agroecology project in rural advising services. And so we're working now, the country number got put down to 4 countries, but we're working to really build the capacities of extension agents in agroecology techniques. And so this is something that's working with really the future that we want to see in the world, and specifically looking at extension and rural advising services. The last part of our work, of course, as a network is network strengthening. And we really believe that this is the lifeblood of such an organization because young people really need connections with each other and connections with like more senior professionals. So a good example of this network building is coming up just in a couple of weeks, and we're preparing for this all the time in my work now. And it is the Africa Agribusiness and Science Week that's being held by FARA, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa. As you might recall, they're our host for our Africa unit. And so we are uniting the African continent of our network, and we're doing a digitalization hackathon there. There's also side events where young people can share their ideas and, of course, get in contact with other organizations like FARA, but also United Nations organizations like FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, but also others. So with this, I would like to leave you just with the quote, "You can do the common things of life in an uncommon way, and you will command the attention of the world." So I encourage you to do that in your careers, both now and in the future. And I thank you so much for listening.
Muchas gracias, Jenna. La verdad es que es muy interesante porque en realidad sí estamos acostumbrados todavía, igual que tú estuviste en Iowa, que es un lugar muy industrial, en la agricultura bastante industrial. Aquí también estamos inmersos en una zona que es pues bastante industrial, bastante comercial. Y normalmente la visión que tenemos como profesionistas y como estudiantes, también los chicos que están aquí, a veces es eso, ¿no? Que tenemos la agricultura es industrial. Lo
Hmm.
que se hace en la agricultura es producir asesorar para producir más y bueno, alimentar. Pero alimentar es mucho más que eso. Alimentar
Mm,
tiene que ver con todo lo que nos decías, o sea, el tener alimentos disponibles tiene que ver con los retos que nos mencionaste al principio, el cambio climático, con los retos de pérdida de biodiversidad, con los retos de conflicto, que ahora lo hemos visto con las guerras en Ucrania, en Rusia, que pues eso ha afectado los sistemas alimentarios. Igualmente con la migración, ¿no? Nosotros lo vivimos mucho de México a Estados Unidos en donde México, no sé si me escucho bien, en donde México pues es también proveedor de mucha mano de obra y aquí nos falta también mucha mano de obra hoy en día.
mm.
Igualmente con los cambios demográficos. Yo creo que es muy, muy interesante lo que nos has venido a plantear y te damos gracias por ello. Hay preguntas, aquí tenemos una pregunta, e invito a que nos dejen más preguntas. Voy a iniciar con una primera pregunta que dice, de la organización IAS,
Mm,
right? IAS Organization, mencionaste voluntarios. ¿Pueden
mm.
ser de cualquier parte o muy específico para alguna región?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, takes volunteers from all around the world, and so does YPARD as well. ES takes volunteers, which are specifically students, so studying agricultural faculties, and those that are have a country. I think it's called a country chapter in EAS. In YPART, you can be from anywhere, even if there's not a country chapter, to get involved. And I can also put a link for EAS and for YPART in the chat.
Sí, gracias, sí, por favor. Entonces son de cualquier lugar, pero estudiantes de agricultura.
Exactly.
¿Sabes si México tiene en IAS?
I'm not sure at the moment. We collaborate with EAS frequently,
Ujú.
um, but I'm not sure if there's still a
Ok,
chapter there.
there's the link. Ahí está el enlace y lo podemos ver.
Mm-hmm.
No sé si hay alguna otra pregunta o alguien que quiera levantar la mano. Em, yo estuve recolectando algunas cosas que nos mencionabas, como algunas habilidades que son importantes tener o cosas por hacer. Y mencionabas practicar idiomas, voluntariarse, volunteer, aprender de otros estudiantes. ¿Nos podrías como resumir o puntualizar algunos de ellos, las habilidades? What skills are
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
basically important for?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely languages, I would say, and not only the ability, but the willingness
Ujú,
to learn different languages and to be in an uncomfortable environment where you may not understand 100% of what people are saying
ujú,
or what, like this situation right now.
ujú. Sí, 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 sí.
Exactly, right? Okay, I'm doing my best. I understand and I respond how I can. Um, Patience and flexibility, right? The ability to really find your way into uncommon ways and to just find a way to make
Ujú,
something work. Conventional, unconventional, to be pragmatic is
ujú,
key, I think, in this profession. If you really want like a standard operating procedure, it's not really a career for you, right? um, then definitely the interest to see issues from different angles and to see issues with empathy. I think every not everyone in the sector has empathy, but I think it's definitely a huge asset because it helps you have patience.
ujú.
Yeah.
Writing them down so I can just put them in the chat also.
Ah, yeah.
Un resumen de lo que pusiste. Em, ¿En dónde pueden empezar? ¿En dónde pueden empezar alguien que quiera, pues, trabajar
Mm,
en esta área?
I mean, a great place to start is to volunteer with EOS, with YPART, for example. Another great place to start is your study abroad office.
Ok.
If you have an office of international programs or things like this, fantastic. Or if you can take a foreign language at your
Ujú,
university, for example, then you could say, oh, I'm quite interested in French, perhaps. French is a fantastic language that, I mean, okay, the languages that you should learn if you're going to work in international development are French, Spanish, English, absolutely English.
ujú.
That's number one. Um, Arabic or Chinese.
Entonces, nuevamente, francés, español, inglés,
Sí.
árabe
Ujú.
y chino, mandarín,
Chino y también ruso.
ruso.
Yeah,
Ok.
can also be good.
¿Alemán dijiste o no? No. Sí lo usas nada más.
I think it's very specific if you are working specifically with Germans.
Ujú,
If you know that your career is going to be focused on Central Europe, German can be very useful.
ok, muy bien. Algo que no te platiqué y bueno, lo voy a comentar porque algunos de nuestros estudiantes apenas la semana anterior estuvieron en un evento que se llama Uno Más Agro y es un evento nuevo en donde aquí en nuestra zona empezaron a enfocarse también en jóvenes,
Oh,
entonces,
cool.
en jóvenes en agricultura. Entonces, creo que va a ser, es muy interesante que noten eso, como no nada más aquí, sino también a nivel internacional. En realidad, los jóvenes son muy valiosos en la agricultura. Em, es una realidad lo que decían los cambios demográficos. Por
Mm,
mucho tiempo, pues se van haciendo más mayor de edad la gente que se dedica a la agricultura. Y
mhm,
entonces, ¿quién atiende esos asuntos? ¿No? Entonces, hay que tomar medidas no solo para convertirnos en fuerza laboral, sino para actuar como jóvenes, con nuevas
mhm.
ideas y con todo eso.
Yes.
Y definitivamente Wipart es un lugar en donde también podemos encontrar muchas ideas y como dijo Jenna, en la parte de México se está reactivando y seguramente ahí pueden también empezar a desarrollar ideas. No hay un camino definido, ¿verdad, Jenna? No hay como un straight pathway.
Absolutely, because groups in YPARD should be doing what they are passionate about and what
Okay.
they think is most important. So, for example, a group in Peru, they made a rural school for rural youth. And they said, okay, we want to go to the highland areas and we want to teach about different agricultural practices that we learned in the university, for example, in a hands on course. So, this was something, oh, maybe my connection is bad. This is something that we learned that Whiteheart Peru did. Another example is that Whiteheart in the Congo, they started farming fish together and learning how to farm fish together. So completely different projects, completely based on the interests. I don't know if I've lost the connection. Creo que se perdí la conexión.
Ajá. Ah, ya volví. Sí,
Ah, ok. No
ok,
sabía si
ok.
era mi conexión o
Sí,
era la tuya.
sí, yo tampoco
Ok.
sabía qué estaba, pero qué pasó, pero ya volví, algo se bloqueó y regresé.
See, yeah, I just explained that YPAR chapters can do what they're interested in. So I gave example from YPAR Peru, but also from YPAR Congo, for example. But there's then also international opportunities that we say, okay, we're looking for folks who are interested in going to an event in Rome, for example, to talk about a specific topic. So this is also an international opportunity. Or if you're interested in an internship, for example, Whitebird Africa offers internships, Whitebird Europe offers internships, things like this.
excelente. ¿Alguna última pregunta o algún otro comentario? Yo dejé ahí en el chat algunas de las preguntas o las respuestas también para que quedara claro. Pero nuevamente te agradecemos mucho, Jenna. Déjame, dame un momentito para abrir algo. Mm. Ah, ok. Te agradecemos mucho que hayas venido y que nos hayas venido a traer esta perspectiva diferente de lo que se puede hacer. Y bueno, el reto está en cómo mantenernos jóvenes para poder hacer. Sí, me quedé pensando, ok, abajo de 40 años ya me quedan muy poquitos,
Oh, qué bonito.
pero tengo estudiantes. Bueno, te quiero dar este reconocimiento, te lo voy a enviar también, pero de manera pública. La Universidad de Guanajuato te otorga el presente reconocimiento por tu
Oh,
participación en las jornadas de agronomía en agricultura en el entorno internacional, organizadas en el departamento, en la División de Ciencias de la Vida, con el seminario titulado The Journey from Student to Young Agricultural Professional, Perspectives from a Career in International Development Cooperation, Irapuato, Guanajuato, 19 de mayo del 2023. Nos firma la doctora Ana Isabel Mirel Sarriaga, directora del Departamento de Agronomía.
muchísimas
Y
gracias.
al contrario, muchísimas gracias, Jenna.
It's such a huge honor to be here with you today and to, yeah, start out our collaboration also with very concrete steps.
Definitivamente aquí vamos a tratar de aprovechar lo que los chicos hacen por eh, hacerlo parte de este movimiento también, ¿no? Igual ahí
Sí.
tienes algunos mensajes de gracias por compartir y por motivar también a los.
Ah, muchas gracias.
Gracias, Jenna. Cuídate mucho y bueno, I think it's time for bed in your.
Yes, or it's time to go have a dinner now.
Ah, ok, ok. Bueno, voy a
Yes.
comer. Cuídate
Okay.
mucho. Nos
Yeah,
vemos.
cuídate. Chao,
Bye.
chao. Take care. Be in touch.
Bye.